Christ is risen. Good morning, Humber Valley. Good morning, YouTube, and happy Easter. My name is Trevor Brisbin, and I am so glad that you're here with us today. Resurrection. Do you see it? Like, is resurrection a one-time event that happened somewhere back there, or is it somehow still happening all around us? Now, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Numbers are still going up. This third wave is looking bad. But at the same time, vaccines are getting into arms, and the vaccines work. There is an end in sight. We can't let down our guard. We've come too far to start being careless now, but we can see it. It's there. There is hope. There is resurrection. The first Easter Sunday, resurrection looked like an empty tomb. But make no mistake, there are glimpses and whispers of resurrection all around us today. And with Easter eyes, resurrection isn't just something that happened back there, but it's a promise, a pattern of hope and possibility saturating creation now. Where do you see resurrection? Now, the Christian scriptures contain 4 versions of the events of Jesus' life. There is the Gospel of Matthew and Mark and Luke and John. So there's not really one perspective on resurrection, there is multiple. And this morning, as we open up John's version, John begins to show us just how imminent resurrection can be if we have the eyes to see. So John chapter 20, which Pippa read for us earlier, the first 2 verses. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they've put him." So right from the beginning, right from the start of the conversation on resurrection, we're introduced to 3 people. First, there's a woman named Mary Magdalene, then there's Simon Peter, and then a third person who's referred to as the other disciple, the one Jesus loved. Do you remember who that other disciple is? It's John, right? It's the guy who's writing or telling the story, which matters. So we're going to circle back to that a little bit later. So John's about to tell us about the resurrection. And he starts the story by introducing us to 3 very specific people, Mary, Peter, and John. Once we know the characters, John then gives us the question. Verse 2, Mary asks, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they put him." Okay, it's not really a question, it's more of a statement, but clearly the implied question is, where is Jesus? Again, in verse 13, Mary asks the same question. She says, "They've taken my Lord away, and I don't know where they have put him." She's looking for the body, and the implied question is, where is Jesus? Now, we as the readers and John as the writer know that by this point, Jesus has already risen from the grave. So in a sense, without knowing it herself, what Mary is really asking here is, where is resurrection? Where will I see resurrection? I think this is one of the driving questions behind John's account of Easter. Where is resurrection? Now we know that John is a brilliant writer, right? He's the author behind John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He's got this beautiful poetic sensibility in his writing. And to that end, I think he begins answering the question, where is resurrection? And his answer to that question is Mary and Peter and John. Mary. What do we know about Mary? Well, we know she's a woman, right? Revelation, right? There it is. We know Mary is a woman. But that matters. Mary is the first one mentioned in this story. I mean, John 20 really is the crescendo of John's gospel. It's the climax of the Christ event. Everything has been leading to this moment of resurrection. And the camera opens on Mary. She's the first one mentioned. She's the first one to the tomb. Mary is the first one to get an inkling that something different is happening this morning. It all begins with Mary. So why does that matter? Well, we know that the first century Palestine, where all this is taking place, was a patriarchal world, which is just a fancy way of saying it was a man's world. There's this social hierarchy that valued men exponentially more than it valued women. It valued adults over kids, boys over girls. Men were perceived as the pinnacle of the social order, which isn't cool. That's not how it should have been or should be. But that is how the world worked. We see this throughout the New Testament as we encounter these uncomfortable passages that say things like, women must be quiet in church, or a woman can't have authority over a man, or wives submit to your husbands. Now, we don't have time to unpack all of that or deconstruct all of that today, but needless to say, it's a description of what the culture looked like, not a prescription for what a culture should look like. It describes patriarchy. Women were diminished. Women weren't centered. There was this social margin is where women sort of existed. It shouldn't have been that way, but it was. Often still is, and is a reality that matters to this moment. Because John tells us a story about resurrection. And the central character, the one who drives the narrative, the one who asks the right questions, the one who's at the center of it all, is a woman. Where is resurrection? What does resurrection look like today? It looks like the moments when those who have been historically on the margins, those deemed less than, those whom society says don't belong at the center of the story. Resurrection happens when power is redistributed, when opportunity is shifted, when privilege is widened to include those bodies and those voices, when marginalized people are centered, when they are celebrated. There, my friends, is resurrection. So resurrection looks like the ordination of a trans minister. Resurrection looks like the dignity and immigration status for Asian sex workers. Resurrection looks like the relentless declaration that Black lives matter. Resurrection today is seen when women sit in the boardroom and earn what they're worth, not pennies on the dollar. Resurrection today is seen when an Indigenous teen is heard and believed over the RCMP. Resurrection today looks like the new Canadian not being forced to drive a cab, but given a path to their profession. It's a recentering. It's an expansion of opportunity. It's a redistribution of power. And John says this is resurrection. Mary. Then you've got Peter. And at this point, Peter is infamous for two things. One, cutting the soldier's ear off, which Jesus rebukes him for. Like, that was a bad move. Can we agree that there's never a good opportunity or a right opportunity to cut somebody's ear off? But the second thing that Peter's known for at this point is at dinner a couple nights ago. Peter makes this big pledge that he would do anything for Christ. He would even die for him. But then, of course, within hours, when it mattered the most, he denies having anything to do with Jesus. Not once or twice, but literally 3 times denies Christ. It's not been a good 24 hours for Peter's relationship with Christ. As the story is told, he's a hypocrite who denies knowing Jesus. Yet here he is, center stage, Sunday morning, in the story of resurrection. Determined, committed, relentless that the mistakes and the shame of Thursday need not define the potential of Sunday. I mean, if Peter shows us anything, it's that resurrection is seen when we don't allow the things that we've done or the things that we've left undone in our past, when we don't let them keep us from pursuing new life and bigger life and creative life in the present. When our family was living in Los Angeles, I was able to do a little bit of work with an organization called Homeboy Industries. It was started by a Roman Catholic priest, Father G, with the explicit intent of connecting Los Angeles' most notorious and most dangerous gangbangers with something better, with a better future. And as you start hanging around Homeboy, you get to know the community. You get to know some of the homies. And needless to say, they've seen some stuff and they've done some stuff. And you don't need to be around there for very long before you begin to sense that there's an audacity that hangs in the air. There's an audacity to these former gangbangers. And when I say former, I mean like some of them have been out like days or weeks, like barely out. They're at Homeboy because they want a future that's bigger and brighter than their past. And not in a capitalist, like I want more money way, but in a primal human way. They have the audacity to believe that the universe has enough grace to transcend the trauma and transgressions of their past. And I mean, I'll tell you, friends, when you hang out in a place like Homeboy, you're hanging out with resurrection. Resurrection looks like the parent who maybe grew up without knowing a whole lot of love in their own childhood, but are 100% committed to learning how to show it to their kids. Resurrection looks like the one who maybe got everything wrong or broke every trust in a previous relationship, but is fighting hard for faithfulness today. Resurrection looks like the ability to own your own mistakes, to apologize for your own actions, and then run towards a better future. Resurrection is seen in the audacity to believe that your future can transcend your past. And it's the audacity to believe that someone else's future can be better than their past. This is what resurrection looks like. Peter. And then last but not least, there's John. Mary, Peter, and John. The resurrection story of John 20 doesn't refer to John as John. When you read the story, it repeatedly calls himself the other disciple. He keeps calling himself the other disciple. In verse 2, in verse 3, in verse 4, and verse 8. Question. Why does he keep referring to himself in the third person? Why doesn't he just talk like Mary, Peter, and I were at the tomb? Or myself and Peter did this? Have you ever known someone who's always talking about themselves in the third person? Trevor wishes you a happy Easter, and Trevor thinks today is really great. Nobody likes that person, right? And that's what's with the part of John, as we're talking about John, what's with the part where he calls himself the other disciple, the one Jesus loves? Like opposed to the other 11 who Jesus doesn't love? It seems to me like if you're going to refer to yourself in the third person for the entire story, as annoying as that is, you can't also give yourself the nickname, the one Jesus loved. Like, it's just a little bit pretentious, right? And then check this out. If that's not enough, let's pick up the story, verse 3. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. Okay, so what? Like, you run faster than Peter. Like, why do we need to know that detail? Verse 5, he bent over and looked at the strips of linen lying there, but did not go in. Then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. Like, yeah, did I tell you that Peter was behind me because I ran faster than Peter? And then again, verse 8, finally the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. Again, like 3 times, John tells us, look, you need to know that I'm a really fast runner. John is literally describing the most important moment in human history. And he needs to make sure everyone knows that he's loved and that he's got great cardio. What's with that? Do you get the sense, and maybe I'm just being hard on John, but do you get the sense that maybe he's that guy? You know what I mean? That guy? Like that guy next door who, while you're shoveling your driveway, has like the ridiculous industrial-sized snowblower doing his own, waving at you with a smile the whole time. You know, that guy. That guy at the office who always has a story to one-up yours. Or the guy on the Zoom meeting who manages to take up more space than anyone else because he's convinced he's the most exciting person on the screen. You know that guy. The guy who calls you guy or like big shooter. Maybe I'm being way too hard on John. But the other disciple, the one Jesus loves, the really fast runner, he's also center stage for resurrection. Because resurrection is happening, even in the lives of people who annoy us, who frustrate us, and who we would really rather avoid. And what if the whole point here is the resurrection isn't just seen in stained glass windows or in our favorite hymns? What if resurrection is waiting to be seen in some of the places we don't like, in some of the people we don't enjoy, in some of the sights and sounds we would rather insulate ourselves from? What if resurrection is waiting within each and every one we meet? What if the message of John 20 here is that resurrection, new life, divine beginnings are inherent in everyone? Whether it's the one relegated to the fringe whom the world has forgotten, or the one who's really messed up and maybe been written off, or even the ones like John who maybe just get under your skin. Is it possible that in his poetic storytelling ability, John wants us to see that resurrection is always present in the other? God is always at work. The Spirit is always stirring. Possibility and new life are always waiting to be called into light. Where do you see resurrection? Humber Valley, we see it in the other. I can say without hesitation, I believe in resurrection. I believe it's waiting for us to see and to celebrate in the thousands of neighbors all around us here in central Etobicoke. So Humber Valley, this Easter Sunday, I invite you. Let's run together. We don't have to keep track of who gets there first. Let's run to the people the rest of the world has marginalized. May we run to the ones who don't feel worthy. May we run to the ones others avoid. And may we have the Easter eyes to see the risen Christ in them. For my friends, it is in the other where new life, resurrection life, is dawning this day. And this is Easter. This is the gospel of Jesus Christ.